Hey everybody, Bryce Koon here with the Crowded Booth, and we are getting ready for another action-packed episode. A couple things before we start. Now, first off, if you're watching this over on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the little notification bell so you know when we release our episodes. It's going to be 3 times a week. We're excited to do that. Today, we're talking about National Signing Day, and I want to let you know it's not going to be your run-of-the-mill conversation about who's a winner or loser. We're going to kind of grasp what are our reactions from the first ever NIL portion of National Signing Day. It's the first full cycle with the NIL. How did it affect it, and kind of how do we feel about it going forward? All of that and more here on today's episode of the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
Well, hello. How you doing, Ralph?
Good, man. It's good to be back.
It's good to be back. Ralph has a little bit different backdrops because Ralph moved.
You did.
He's still in the beautiful city, the Fountain City, the Columbus, Georgia, but he's just a little closer to the highway now. He's moved. We got him moved in, and hey, now we are talking more and more. But Ralph, listen, it's we took a little bit of break. We're back, but it's not like the sports news started. We're going to talk about that and more today. But we want to make sure, first off, we got a couple things right here. Thecrowdedbooth.com right there below Ralph, or if you're listening in on the radio with our friends today on Thursday, one things you got to do, check it out. We got a new layout, got some new cool interviews and articles going to be coming out. We're also going to be releasing a weekly column presented by an interesting person. It'll be fun with that as well. Also want to thank our sponsors as well. You're going to hear from them throughout today's show. And if you're interested in sponsoring the show or becoming a partner in some sorts, hey, you don't have to be a sponsor. We could work anything out. We're willing to do that here on today's show. Email us at thecrowdedbooth@gmail.com and follow us social media wise at the Crowded Booth everywhere as well. Ralph, it's time. It's time to talk about National Signing Day. Now, listen, a lot of the pundits, a lot of the national media, Ralph, has talked, how do they think the winners and losers? And you and I were looking at, the big sites, 24/7 Sports, Rivals, and kind of what they thought about that. But let's just start right here. Ralph, what in the world are your reactions from kind of the first ever recruiting cycle with the NIL in effect?
Well, at first, a lot of people said it's going to play a big part, and a lot of people said it wouldn't play a big enough part because kids want to go play at the college of their dreams or the college of their choice. It's their choice, But we saw how big the NIL played into the fact, and I'm not going to call anything out, but we saw the number one recruit switches from a Power 5 to an FCS school, and everyone knows it was because of an NIL deal. So just starting with all that, a lot of players went to different colleges that no one really expected them to go because probably got a better NIL deal there. The colleges that can provide bigger NILs. I mean, the bigger ones, like I'll go off the top of my head, USC. USC is going to have a better NIL product than Wisconsin. Even Auburn might have a better one than, let's say, Troy, just because I'm a Troy fan. But NIL played a huge part in this year. This was a big to do, honestly. And you see a lot of coaches are probably saying like, well, we kind of got the back end of it because we don't have the NIL deals to provide these players to come here and play for us.
Yeah, and Ralph, it hits on something too, which is interesting because you mentioned we don't have. And so I was talking with a national writer the other day about this, and I said, what are your thoughts on this? How does this change the landscape? And listen, we're going to get into some of the winners and losers, but I thought how is the NIL impacting not only the 2022 class, what did we see from that, but just kind of going forward and beyond? And Ralph, I think it begs the question. I tweeted out yesterday, and a lot of my followers are on it. They're Georgia Tech fans, so they thought I was speaking to their program. But in fact, this is for programs not only, but programs that might be in the same situation as Georgia Tech around the country. Kansas. I think Nebraska puts more money in, but programs that are kind of, you would think that they would be better, but they're just not. So yeah. I think at some point, you have to say from an administration standpoint, they've got to back and they've got to be behind this entire NIL movement. It has to be from an organizational standpoint. One of the big things, Ralph, we saw after the national championship game was that Alabama, the state of Alabama, was repealing their NIL laws. Mm-hmm. With that, it was going to change some things. We've seen Ole Miss be very active in the transfer portal, and it kind of goes hand in hand with this whole new thing, the opportunities. Now, here is the actual truth. Coaches cannot use it as a recruiting tool. Now, what does that mean? It means that if Ralph is a recruit, I can't sit here and go, all right, Ralph, we're going to offer you $60,000 and you're going to have a guaranteed Zaxby's deal, something like that. What it does mean, though, is that they can pull figures from what their players have already made. The deals have to take place outside of the coach administration. It has to be kind of a third party, the company, or as we know them as kind of your booster club. If you're a high school football fan, it's something like that. So,
Mhm.
so Ralph, do you agree in this sense? And I was telling this person, there's probably 25, 30 programs across the country that realistically have kind of your baseline, which I think is you've got to have resources both financially and kind of academically. Okay. You got to be a good academic program. You also have to financially have the backing. You've got to have a strong donor alumni base. And then I would say the third thing is that it's something that can be built in, but you should probably already have built in really good facilities
Yeah.
with that. Now, a lot of that we've seen in recent years is an arms race. But the thought process is when I was talking with this person was there's probably 25 to 30 programs that have the potential to be that, the potential to be a monster. Not now, obviously the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Clemsons, they're going to have they're there right now. They're right now. But there's programs that say if we want to get serious, and I think in this new age of NIL, is everyone's complaining, be mad at your own program because I think they need to take it a little more seriously. You're going to have to pay up front. One of the biggest things, Ralph, was when Kirby Smart came to Georgia, he said, listen, Mark Richt's a great coach, but if you want to be where Alabama is, you've got to give me the same opportunities, the same resources, the same amount of staff members. You've got to have the buy-in. And I think we've talked so much about that from a staff standpoint, but would you agree this NIL, if a school wants to be serious, they're going to have to get on board with this they would and be at risk of kind of getting left behind in a hurry.
Well, you have to ask your boosters a lot, a lot more than you have in the past. So, from providing money for new facilities or maybe a new jersey or maybe even more for money for coaches, you have to ask them, can you help provide more NIL deals? There's a lot of rumors about some transfer players that wanted to go to a certain college, but he knew that they couldn't provide enough NIL deals for him.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's a big time player, big name player. I'm not going to expose it because I'm not 1,000% sure it's true, but there's a lot of rumors about it. And you're asking your board and your boosters to really step up more than they have all year to provide more money for quote unquote a good contract for this kid to come play. And that sounds weird saying that because obviously the coaches cannot say anything. The board of trustees can't say anything, or anything in the athletics department can't say anything. But outside the school, outside the coach's office and the athletic department's office, it's free game for these kids. They're going to sign to whatever contracts best fits them. You look at Bryce Young; he's got Subway, he's got Nike too. I mean,
it's crazy.
He's set perfectly right now, and he'll probably get more and more in the next 2 to 3 years doing this NFL. It's free game for him. So, and it's free game honestly right now, but. Some of these coaches are going to help these kids control what they do with their, NIL contracts. I'm not going to say they're having any impact on who they choose, but, help
it plays into it.
Yeah, you have to, if you go to Alabama, you're probably going to get a Nike one because they're Nike. You go to Auburn, Under Armour. You go to North Carolina, you're probably going to get a Jordan contract because that's what they wear. Look at that plays into a big part to where they go to school. It does.
It plays into a big role, and I think too in knowing and understanding where college football is. A lot of people say, "Well, I don't like it; it's dirty." Well, listen, the whole idea of the bag man, which we've heard for so many years, it's gone because now all of it is legal. We can't really talk about what happened in the past because now programs like an A&M, and we're going to get into that in a second. Your Alabamas, your Georgias, those are right there, Ralph. That's your top 3 in this recruiting class. They did what they had to do, and they've established it. And something else, kind of the last note before we go to commercial break, is I've also seen programs set up NIL-specific education stuff, programs that are allowing boosters to funnel in there and say, okay, let's say, Joe is a booster over at Auburn, and Auburn has an NIL program. He can then reach out to a Calzada and say, hey, let's get, the local calzone place, something like that, but they have these opportunities. If your school's not setting this up, then they're just in danger of getting left behind. And to me, the only thing you can be mad about as a fan is my school's not stepping up to the table. and I tweeted this last night and yesterday. If you want to be at the table with the big boys, you've got to pony up and bring the money. It's what it's about, whether you like it or not. And I'm not saying that from a standpoint of where I'm liking where college football is going this, but this is what's happening. It's what's happening in the game nowadays. And so if you want to be a contender, if you want to have a spot at the table, you're going to have to do that on a consistent basis. I think we're still going to see your Cincinnatis, your teams that are going to have a run of 2 or 3 years of really great football. But your consistent ones, your Alabamas and Georgias, are always going to be at the table because they're the biggest spenders and they're the most heavily involved in recruiting, resources, recruiting budgets, staff, how many analysts they have. That's one of the big things. When we come back, Ruff, and I'm going to talk about some of the winners and losers, and we'll talk about 2 coaches who had different outputs. I'm going to bring one coach table, and then Ralph, his name rhymes with Bimbo, and we're going to talk about that here in a second.
It's way excellent.
Cook's Place began serving our signature hot dogs in 1985 from a cart on Broadway. We still serve the best hot dogs and scrambled dogs in town at the corner of Moon and Miller Road and at the landings. Our friendly staff won't let you leave hungry. Come in and eat to the beat with our 50s jukebox. Cook's Place, fast service, great people, awesome food. What are you waiting for?
Back here at the crowded booth, Bryce, Koon, Ralph, Leary, we appreciate you tuning in on YouTube, or if you're listening on the radio as well. We're talking NIL opportunities, how it affected the class of 2022. But Ralph, let's talk about this. I'll let you have the floor on this because you were more in tune with kind of what was happening with Jimbo Fisher. I read some articles about what Kirby Smart said it. They said it kind of differently in different ways. But let's hear. Walk us through kind of what happened with this Jimbo Fisher situation. And it's just it was a more defensive mechanism when it was like, hey, you don't have to be so defensive about it. People may not like it, but you got to be okay with it.
Well, first off, congratulations to A&M. They land the #1 class in history. Now, props to the recruiting team because I'm not going to say Jimbo did a bad job. They did a great job recruiting. But in the National Signing Day post recruiting interview he had, at the end of the day, he's sitting in front of the Texas A&M logo and everything. He's talking, and someone asked him, was this recruiting success backed upon the success of your NIL deals here? And he kind of barked on it and said that had nothing to do with this class. This was a hard work by our staff. It's insulting to the kids that come here and that you institute that. You have to say, we know the NIL deal is in play here. It's in play at every single college these days. You see, look at Jackson State, Clemson, Georgia, Alabama. I can go on about who has NIL deals. You cannot say that they don't come there for an NIL deal. It's legal. It's okay to accept it. You don't have to defend yourself anymore. It's not 4 years ago and saying, oh, we heard that so-and-so got some money to come here. You could argue back then because it's probably not true, or it was, but now it's legal. It's okay to accept it. It's not a big deal. Like, I get it. You're upset. You want to say it's all because of my team, my staff. We worked hard for this. I get that. But you have to agree that the NIL deal plays in effect at wherever college you're working at, no matter how big you are. From Alabama, honestly, Alabama has the top 3 class every single year. We know that because that's not just off. Now, if they say that to Saban, I don't think it's completely. He could argue with it. His past success has done plenty of work for him than an NIL deal there. Jimbo, on the other hand, I I understand what he's trying to say, but you have to agree that you argue for no reason. That's all I have to say about that.
And I'll say this. So you're right. Texas A&M gets the #1 class, but results matter. And I was talking with someone about this the other day they were talking about the social media. Social media NIL opportunities are going to be kind of like your appetizers. What your main course is does this team win? Take Miami, for example. You remember the kind of De'Aaron King deals that were happening last year, and the one booster for Miami or a business owner down in the Coral Gables area gave out these massive, like, to every single player. And what did Miami do? They didn't have the season they expected. Yeah. So eventually, if you don't have seasons that you're expecting over and over again, those NIL opportunities are going to be taken away. So whatever, if you're kind of how I am, you're the old school fan where you want to say, well, I want it to be based on wins and losses. That's never going to go away. I think at some point, whether it's 5-6 years down the road from now, there's going to be programs right now, Ralph, that are giving out NIL opportunities, but they never get the results to back them up. And so then those opportunities go away. They can no longer afford that because boosters are going to say, well, what are we investing in? It really comes down to economics. What is the return on investment? And if they're not getting that, then they're going to pull out eventually. But like what you said, Kirby Smart talked about this, and he made the media kind of wary of the overselling of this. It's not like every single kid's getting an opportunity. The top kids will, but he related it to an example of Jordan Davis. Jordan Davis was a 3-star offensive lineman that Georgia saw as a defensive tackle out of Charlotte, North Carolina. Jordan Davis would not be getting NIL offers if he was coming out right now, at that role. So there is still value to being developed, and it's still going to matter. Now, Davis obviously capitalized on the Morgan & Morgan law firm that he had his senior year, but there still is value. And so I think that's one thing that fans can take a saving grace is, hey, it's not going to become this complete money grab where teams like Miami, let's say they don't ever win 9 games again, they're still going to get all the top players. No, because kids do care about winning. And there is and going places that has a chance to win a national championship. Now that might be a little naive, but I feel like that.
Well, one thing I want to say now, and I'm just going to back off with Jimbo Fisher real quick. If Jimbo Fisher is able to turn this season around or next season around and win and go undefeated, win the SEC, go to the playoff, win the national championship, props to him. He was able to develop the players he has on his team before these freshmen took over, and you were able to run with what you have. But until you do this, I will not say it's all, you cannot say all this is all work. This is what your team's done. Yeah. I get it. You recruited very well in your state. You easily, hands down, won the state of Texas. You went and dipped into some other states, went and got some guys who decommitted from other colleges, and you took advantage of that. And that's not a bad thing. It's just what you have to do in this day and age to get the big name guys. I mean, look at Clemson. They knew Auburn right now is a dumpster fire. But that's honestly saying. Someone wants to argue with me, please, we'll go at it. Auburn could not hold on to some recruits. Caden Story, a defensive tackle, committed to Auburn, flipped to Clemson on signing day after being committed to Auburn for about 6 or 7 months.
And he's from this area, played at Lynette High School. Yeah,
exactly. So they took advantage of another college's misfortunes of having some issues and got it. Like they took in A&M, Jake Johnson, he was committed to LSU. Big Ed Orgeron fan. His brother plays there. Brother transferred, went to Texas A&M. Where's Jake Johnson, the 4-star tight end, going? Texas A&M. You take advantage of what is given to you. And A&M did a very good job of that. I will not say what Jimbo Fisher and his team did was a bad thing, but you have to accept what NIL plays into it now because they're going to go to the colleges that give them the best offers now. I would. Why would you not?
and what it's going to become is, and Nick Saban warned about this, Ralph, that he said, listen, it's the rich are going to get richer. And what he meant by that is teams with already winning traditions are going take this and let's just take Alabama and Georgia. Yeah. They're going to get richer off of this. And it's not like Saban was talking about other programs. Like what you said about A&M is A&M doesn't necessarily have the track record resume of what you would think when you see a team with the number 1 overall recruiting class. Now they have a coach that is going to be he's a great coach and he, has won a national championship, but they didn't have the track record on the field. Well, now you add in the Texas oil money, essentially that's out there, exactly. and they can have the opportunities. It changes things. But for programs like Georgia and Alabama, they're already, I'm telling you, we're going to see a shift. We're going to see this top half go away. You're going to see programs like Georgia, Alabama, Clemson kind of gets back. They've got some things to figure out with their staff, new OC, new DC type of role. Ohio State's, if your Texas's, if your USC's rise, you're going to see these premier programs. Essentially what you're going to see is they are going to take the next step and the gap is going to become further. And that is something that's going to happen because why? Because of their results based. And right now it's Georgia and Alabama. And we saw Georgia benefited from that. They brought in Christian Miller this past on yesterday. They brought in a 3-star running back that is people feel like is very underrated. He kind of was a late riser. They replaced that. So programs like that, Ralph, are going to be able to do it. And then Alabama in the portal, Jermaine Burton, Eli Ricks, and Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm going to tell you right now, and I've covered Georgia Tech for the past 3-4 seasons. Fans know it. Jahmyr Gibbs is on my short list of Heisman candidates for next year because he's going to have an actual offensive line to play behind, and he's that good. Yeah. But Ralph and I are going to talk about some winners and losers specifically, but it's interesting to hear some of the coaches. You had Jimbo Fisher, like you said, Ralph, that was more of the well, we did it the right way and trying to prove it, which it's all public knowledge. We know that.
Right.
But then Kirby Smart said, listen, it is great, but people are probably overselling it a little bit because you still have to develop players.
Right.
And that is to it. There's going to be kids that signed yesterday that are 3 stars. Maybe they find themselves an NIL deal their junior year. That's going to be part of it that still has to happen.
Well, and there's always that one little player that comes in and has a cool, I'll go and use a 5-star from, last year's class, Kool-Aid McKinstry.
Exactly.
What was his first NIL contract?
Was it Kool-Aid?
Yeah. Yes, it was. I mean, that makes sense. It's funny. It's a great combo. Yeah. But, you might have a player at a college that's a 3-star and has a name like that and can run with a local business there, and they'll do it. It'd be fun. It's a great way to get in touch with the city and the business, get in touch with the college and everything. It helps a lot of people out in the long run, honestly. I know it helps out the players the most, but some of these, local, businesses, and, what you talk about, Jordan Davis and Morgan & Morgan. I mean, yeah, I'm sure a lot of people know who Morgan & Morgan is, but Jordan Davis being the pitcher athlete for them, that's got to be kind of fun,
Yeah. Well, it's like Georgia had a NIL deal this past year. It was called the DGD Fund, the Damn Good Dog Fund at Ralph, and it was based on former Georgia players putting together money, and so Stetson Bennett was one of those. And I've never had an issue with stuff like that. Like, it's local, and what it does is they give money back into, like, the Boys and Girls Club of Athens. It's things like that. But when you start talking about national brands, I think that's when people start to get a little uncomfortable.
Look, let's just say this: the best NIL contract signed is Stetson Bennett with Canes.
That was awesome.
That's the only one that matters anymore to me.
Hey, when we come back, we're going to talk winners and losers. Ralph's going to give his big winner, big loser from this signing day period, the late signing day, and I'm going to give you mine as well when we come back here on the Crowded Booth.
Your soap is ugh, and your body wash is a synthetic detergent. But you're not a dish. You're a man. Switch to Dr. Squatch Natural Soap for Men. For men who build things. Open pickle jars on the first try. Slay dragons. And let their daughters braid their hair. Men who like to feel good and smell. Titillating. Dr. Squatch takes you places you never thought you'd go. Naked.
Back here on the Crowded Booth as talking winners and losers. So let's start off with the winners, Ralph, and tell me yours and why. Who is your big winner? We kind of talked about A&M. I know they did a lot, but who's your big winner from the entire 2022 cycle?
We talk a lot about the SEC and a lot of teams in the Southeast. I'm going to go out west. You got to go Oregon, dude.
They did good.
They took a big loss with losing Cristobal to Miami. A lot of people were kind of saying, who's going to take that job over? They come down to the South, get Dan Lanning, the defensive mastermind for Georgia this past year, and he hit the head on the nail in recruiting this year. Pulled in some great he got a running back that flipped from Georgia from right, Jordan James, and a 4-star pass rusher, Emryon Winston. He killed it, honestly. Yeah. Dan Lanning, big day for him. I thought he really, honestly, if you kept up with Georgia's past year, especially late in the season, when he took the job at Oregon, he was there for a few days. They played the SEC championship game. He was at the game he coached the game. Went back to Oregon, was recruiting constantly for Oregon. He was helping Georgia playing for the playoff game. Came back for practice and everything. Was still recruiting all over the phone, going on doing visits in person. And he was multitasking the whole time. Props to him. He took it in there and won that championship with Georgia. The next day, he's on the plane in the Eugene, recruiting the whole entire time. Props to Dan Lanning. Huge win for the Oregon program today. They found their next head coach who's going to be there for, I feel like, a while. I think he'll do great there. You always think about Oregon with great offense, such a powerful offense with Chip Kelly. It's going to be a little bit different now. I think their defense is going to be a lot better, and he is just going to kill it up there, honestly, I feel like.
Yeah, and I like that. I mean, like you talked about, the ability. I mean, he'd been on campus 20-something days, and he's able to secure a class #1 in the Pac-12. And I know that doesn't mean a ton to Pac-12 fans and fans outside the country, but still to be able to do that, especially with what Lincoln Riley's trying to build at USC. Utah's still in the picture, obviously. That's big for them. I've got mine a little bit off the beaten path here, and it's going to go with a team that's in the Big Ten. They haven't had a ton of success, and it's Nebraska.
Yeah.
And the reason is because I think very few people around the program, very people outside of being around the program, thought they were going to have a big day. Me personally, we had heard, the 4-star receiver Janarian Bonner was strongly considering Nebraska. He was committed to Tech. He flips there, Ralph. Ajay Allen, they flipped the 4-star running back from TCU. Scott Frost gets some playmakers, and this is something too. I know Scott Frost has not had a great tenure so far in Nebraska, but this past season, Ralph, it was like 8 games or something like that were like 1-possession games. So they're a couple playmakers. That's what they felt like from turning the corner. But you add in the fact, and it's something we have to consider, is that they had a top 10 ranked transfer class per 24/7 Sports. You're bringing in some talent there into Lincoln, Nebraska. Everyone, all of us, we remember kind of what Nebraska was, what they can be when they were in the Big 12. This is a program that I think that positioned themselves well. Now, I said it all the time, it's going to take development. We can recruit. How do you develop those kids for the next level? So I've got Nebraska being a big winner. And, we didn't want to give run of the mill. You gave Oregon. That's a fantastic one. I gave Nebraska. We all know A&M, Georgia, Alabama. Yeah, they're big ones. Also, we talked about earlier, to me, Clemson did a really good job. They had lost 3 top 50 prospects in the early signing period, but it was kind of Caden's story, the guy here locally and then at a Lynette High School and then kind of just turned the tide. They're going to be bringing in a new OC and new DC. I'll say this, that's tough for any program, but if you're a brand new coordinator and you're dealing with that kind of talent, you feel a little bit better about your situation. Ralph, who's your big loser, though, in the 2022 cycle? You mentioned it before the show. I don't know if you're going to stick with them.
No, I don't think I'm going to stick with them. I'm still going to stay in the same conference. So I'm going to go Florida. I think Florida lost out a lot of guys they really wanted to get. Trayvonte Citizen, it was down to LSU, Miami, Auburn, and Florida, and decided to go Miami, which I think shocked a lot of people. I think it was down. People said it was down to Auburn and LSU, and he chose Miami out of the blue. So, Florida lost out on some guys they really wanted to get. They did get Jack Pyburn, the 4-star pass rusher from Miami, and Billy Napier is going to do okay there. This is not a beat down on Florida. Is what they've done there. They're going through a new coach, new whole staff. They're going to have to build some things up, and I think what Billy Napier is doing is great there. They're going to do fine next year, but it's just it's a first year head coach, first time in Power 5. Recruiting's a little more hectic for SEC schools, so you're competing with a lot more schools in Florida than you were in Louisiana. So Napier's going to be fine there. It's just a rough class this year with losing Dan Mullen, a lot of their coordinators, a lot of position coaches. So give it some time, Florida. They'll be back.
Yeah, and what's interesting, Ralph, is Napier and Dan Lanning were in similar situations. New jobs had to hire new staff. Now, this is the big thing, and it might have affected it because Oregon's class is not flashy. They did some things, but if you put the reason Florida is like what you said, where they are geographically and the conference they're in makes them a loser. If Florida was in the ACC, we're talking about them being a winner potentially, and I think that's one of the big things too, like you were talking about.
All right.
Yeah, sounds good. My loser in this. Go ahead.
I just want to say, in Oregon, only having is only the 25th best class according to 247 Sports, and they brought 15 commits in that are 3 or 4 stars that are shown on here. To recruit in that area, to have to recruit your own state. You win your state almost every single year. To dip into California to compete against USC, UCLA. Even schools out west in general, you're competing with a lot out there. So you're dipping into multiple states that you really cannot win a lot of times in the past. So now Dan Lanning's there. He's going to win them. Florida, you have to win your own state for Florida. Florida State's in a rebuild. UCF's doing okay, but they're moving to the Big 12. And, Gus Malzahn's will recruit very well down there. Miami, they're taking over Florida, and it's starting to become very – very spot on for them. I think Mario Cristobal's a great recruiter. He's going to do great jobs there. So if you're Billy Napier, you got to get a start on 2023 class because you may end up being another loser next year.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see what they do. You took mine, Florida, and so I'll stick with you on it. Florida is a little bit of a loser in the situation, but I think we have to view it just a tad bit because Napier did a lot for the program. And if you put them in a different conference, but because they're in the SEC, because they have to play Georgia every single year, and if they want to make it to Atlanta, odds are they're going to have to run through Alabama, it makes them a loser in this cycle. But I guess I caution people to understand, hey, I think Napier's been a good hire. I think he also went to that administration, and he said what Kirby said 6 years ago, Ralph, is he said, listen, you want to be like Florida and Georgia, or Alabama and Georgia every year? You've got to give me the resources. He hired over 45 support staff. He's done a good job of that, and I think that's something to be interested in going forward.
I do want to say I think everyone kind of expected us to say Auburn is the big loser today. But I will say this. I think what was going on at Auburn right now is a lot to talk about, and we can do a whole show on it probably. Two things I want to say that I found out yesterday. I didn't know this. Auburn signed a kicker named Alec McPherson, okay? His older brother is Evan McPherson, the kicker who sent the Cincinnati Bengals to the Super Bowl. So
and the AFC title game.
I will say this: Auburn's gonna be fine. I think I'm gonna be on the. If they find the recruit or their coordinators that can stay there, they will be okay. It's not as big as a dumpster fire as people think it is.
Well, listen, appreciate it, Ralph. We're out of time for today. Make sure to tune in on YouTube. Find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook as well. Give us a follow at Bryce_Koon and at Ralph Leary on Twitter. It's a ton of fun. We will see you next time. We're going to be talking about those Auburn Tigers. What is going on over